Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to continue some Karlson stories, and our next one is called Karlson Gets Up to Some Jiggery-pokery. Right, I'm in the mood for a bit of fun now, said Karlson a little while later. Let's take a walk on the rooftops, round about, and I'm sure we'll come up with something. Smidge was more than happy with the idea. He took Karlson's hand, and together they marched out of the door and onto the roof. It would soon be getting dark, and everything looked so beautiful. The air was that special blue it sometimes is in the spring. All the houses looked mysterious and exciting, the way houses do at dusk. The park where Smidge often played was gleaming wonderfully green, way down there, and the glorious scent of the big balsam poplar in the courtyard of the flats reached right up to the roof. It was a wonderful evening for rooftop walks. All the windows were open, and you could hear so many different sounds. People talking, children laughing, and children crying. There was the clatter of cookery from a nearby kitchen where somebody was washing the dishes. A dog whimpered, and somewhere someone was tinkling on a piano. From down in the street you could hear the pop-pop of a motorbike, and as that died away, a cart horse came clopping along, pulling a cart, and every clop of the horse carried right up to the roof. If people knew how great it is to walk on roofs, there'd be nobody left down there in the street, said Smidge. It's such fun. Yes, and thrilling too, said Karlson, because you can so easily fall off. I'll show you a few places where you're guaranteed to almost slip off every time. The buildings were so tightly packed together that you could step from one roof to the next. There were lots of odd little gable ends and attic rooms and chimneys and angles and corners, so it never got boring. And it really was thrilling, just like Karlson said, precisely because you almost slipped every now and then. There was one place where the gap between two buildings was quite large, and that was one of those places where Smidge nearly fell off. But Karlson caught him at the last minute, when one of Smidge's legs was already dangling over the edge of the roof. Fun, isn't it? Said Karlson, hauling Smidge back up. That was just the sort of thing I meant. Do it again. But Smidge didn't want to do it again. It was a bit too almost for him. There were several places where you really had to cling on with your arms and your legs to stop yourself from falling off, and Karlson wanted Smidge to enjoy himself as much as possible, so he didn't always take the easiest route. I think we'll try a bit of Jiggery-pokery now, said Karlson. I usually take a turn about the roof of an evening and do a bit of Jiggery-pokery for the people who live in all these attic rooms. What do you do to them? Said Smidge. I have different Jiggery-pokes for different people. Of course, never the same one twice. The world's best Jiggery-poker. Guess who's that? Just then a baby started screaming somewhere close by. Smidge had heard that child crying before, but then it had gone quiet for a while. The baby must have been having a little rest, but now it was starting up again, and the cries were coming from the nearest window in the roof. It sounded so pathetic and forlorn. Poor little thing, said Smidge. Maybe it's got a tummy ache. We'll soon find out, said Karlson. Come on. They climbed along the gutter until they were just under the window, and then Karlson cautiously popped up his head and peered inside. Very lonely baby, he said. Mommy and Daddy are out gallivanting, I expect. The baby cried more pitifully than ever. Easy now, take it easy, said Karlson, pulling himself over the window ledge. Here comes Karlson on the roof, the world's best nanny. Smidge didn't want to be left on his own outside. He wriggled over the window ledge after Karlson, though he felt rather anxious about what might happen if the children's mom and dad suddenly came home. But Karlson wasn't the least anxious. He went over to the baby's cot and stuck a podgy finger under its chin. Goo goo gaga, he said roguishly. And then he turned to Smidge. That's what you say to babies, they like it. The baby stopped crying in sheer surprise, but as soon as it had recovered, it started again. Goo goo gaga, and then you do this, said Karlson. He snatched the baby from its cot and hoisted it towards the ceiling several times. Maybe the baby enjoyed it because it suddenly smiled a little toothless smile. Karlson looked proud of himself. Nothing to it, this cheering up babies, he said. The world's best nan. That was as far as he got before the baby started crying again. Goo goo gaga, roared Karlson angrily, hoisting the baby into the air more roughly than before. Goo goo gaga, I said, and I mean it. The baby screamed. The baby screamed fit to burst, and Smidge held out his arms for it. Come on, let me hold her, he said. He really liked tiny children, and he had argued quite a bit with Mom and Dad about whether he could have a little sister, since they stubbornly refused to let him have a dog. He took the little bundle from Karlson and held it tenderly in his arms. Please don't cry, he said. The baby went quiet and looked at him with a pair of bright, serious eyes. Then it smiled its toothless smile again and burbled quietly. It's my goo-goo gaga that did the trick, said Karlson. That's one thing that never fails. I've put it to the test 1,000 times. I wonder what the baby's name is, said Smidge, stroking his finger along her little soft cheek. Sweetie Pie, said Karlson. That's what most of them are called. Smidge had never heard of a baby being called Sweetie Pie, but he supposed the world's best nanny knew more about baby names than he did. Little Sweetie Pie, said Smidge. I think you're hungry. Because Sweetie Pie had grabbed hold of his finger and was trying to suck it. If Sweetie Pie's hungry, then there's some sausage and mashed over there, said Karlson, looking into the tiny kitchen. No child need starve as long as Karlson has the strength to deliver the sausage and mash. Smidge didn't think Sweetie Pie could eat sausage and mashed potatoes. Babies this small are supposed to have milk, aren't they? He said. Don't you know the world's best nanny knows what children can eat and what they can't eat? Said Karlson. All right then, I'll fly off and find a cow. He cast an angry look at the window. But it's going to be tricky getting the poor old cow through that poky little window. Sweetie Pie was reaching desperately for Smidge's finger and whimpering miserably. She really did sound hungry. Smidge checked the kitchen, but he couldn't find any milk. There were just 3 slices of cold sausage on a saucer. Easy now, take it easy, said Karlson. I've just remembered where there's some milk. I often have a slurp myself when I'm passing. Haste and hops, and I'll be back soon. Then Karlson turned the winder on his tummy and whirred off through the window before Smidge could close an eyelid. Smidge was so scared. What if Karlson was gone for hours like he usually was? And what if the baby's mom and dad came home and found Smidge with their Sweetie Pie in his arms? But Smidge didn't have long to worry. This time Karlson had hurried up. He buzzed in through the window like the cock of the walk, holding one of those feeding bottles babies use. Where did you get that? Asked Smidge, surprised. At my usual place for milk, said Karlson. A balcony in another part of town. Did you pinch it? Asked Smidge in alarm. I happened to have borrowed it, said Karlson haughtily. Borrowed? What are you thinking of taking it back then? Smidge asked. Never, said Karlson. Smidge gave him a stern look, but Karlson flicked his fingers and said, One little bottle of milk, that's a mere trifle. The person I've borrowed this has got triplets and keeps loads and loads of bottles cool in ice buckets on their balcony, and they like me borrowing their milk for Sweetie Pie. Sweetie Pie stretched out her little hands for the bottle and squealed hungrily. I'll warm it up a bit, said Smidge quickly, and passed Sweetie Pie over to Karlson, and Karlson shouted, Goo gaga, and hoisted Sweetie Pie up in the air, while Smidge went to the little kitchen to warm the bottle. A short while later, Sweetie Pie lay sleeping like an angel in her cot. She was full and happy. Smidge had tucked her in, and Karlson had prodded her with his finger and shouted, Goo goo gaga, but Sweetie Pie dozed off all the same because she was so full and sleepy. We'll just do a bit of Jiggery-pokery before we go, said Karlson. He went into the kitchen and brought back the 3 slices of cold sausage. Smidge watched him wide-eyed. Now just you watch this for Jiggery-pokery, said Karlson, hanging 1 slice of sausage on the handle of the kitchen door. Number 1, he announced, nodding with satisfaction. Then he went briskly over to the bureau. A lovely white china dove was standing on it, and before Smidge knew it, the white dove had a slice of sausage in its beak. Number 2, said Karlson, and number 3 is for Sweetie Pie. He skewered the last slice of sausage on a little stick and put the stick in the sleeping baby's hand. It looked very funny. You might almost believe Sweetie Pie herself had been to the kitchen to fetch some sausage and then fallen asleep over it. But Smidge still felt he had to say, "Oh, don't do that, please. Easy now, take it easy," said Karlson. "That ought to put her mom and dad off gallivanting in the evenings." "How?" asked Smidge. "They won't dare leave a baby who can walk and help herself to a sausage on her own any more, because who knows what she might decide to take next time? Daddy's Sunday beer, maybe." He adjusted the stick so it was held more firmly in Sweetie Pie's hand. "Easy now, take it easy," he said. "I know what I'm doing all right, because I'm the world's best nanny." Just then, Smidge heard footsteps on the stairs and almost jumped out of his skin with fright. "Oh no, they're coming," he whispered. "Easy now, take it easy," said Karlson, and they both rushed back to the window. Smidge heard a key being inserted in the lock, and he thought there was no chance, but somehow he managed to scramble over the window ledge. A second later, he heard the door open, and a voice said, "Mummy's little Susie fast asleep." "Yes, fast asleep," said another voice. Then there was a shriek, and Smidge knew Sweetie Pie's mom and dad had seen the sausage. He didn't wait to hear what happened next, but scurried to catch up with the world's best nanny, who was just hiding behind a chimney pot. "Do you want to see a couple of thugs?" asked Karlson when they had had a little rest. "I've got 2 first-class thugs in another attic over there." Karlson almost made it sound as if they were his own thugs. They couldn't be, of course, but Smidge wanted to see them all the same. Voices of howls of laughter were coming from their window in the roof. "Well, well, they are in a good mood," said Karlson. "Let's go and see what's amusing them so much." They crept along the gutter, and Karlson popped his head up to look in. There were curtains across the window, but there was a gap in them for him to peep through. "The thugs have got a visitor," whispered Karlson. Smidge looked in too. He saw 2 rough characters sitting there, who might very well be the thugs, and with them was a small, harmless, kindly-looking man who looked as if he might come from the countryside, where Granny lived. "Do you know what?" whispered Karlson. "I reckon those thugs are trying a bit of jiggery-pokery for themselves, but they're going to have to stop." He looked in again. "Sure as eggs is eggs. Those thugs are jiggery-poking that poor chap with the red tie," he whispered to Smidge. The thugs and their guest with the red tie were sitting round a little table just under the window. They were eating and drinking, and the thugs were slapping the man with the red tie heartily on the back and saying, "We're so glad we met you, dear Oscar." "I'm glad too," said Oscar. "When you arrive in the city, just like I have, you need some good friends, fellows you can rely on. Otherwise, there's no knowing what might happen. You might get taken in by swindlers." The thugs nodded. "Quite right. You might run into swindlers," said one of them. What a good job you met Spike and me. Yes, if you hadn't met Rollo and me, things could have turned out very bad," said the other one. "Now you just eat and drink and enjoy yourself," said the one called Spike, and slapped Oscar on the back again. Then he did something that amazed Smidge. As if by accident, he slipped his hand into Oscar's back pocket and took out his wallet, which he tucked carefully into the back pocket of his own trousers. And Oscar didn't notice a thing, maybe because at that moment Rollo was hanging round his neck and slapping his back. But when Rollo had finished his slapping and took his hand away, Oscar's watch just happened to come too. Rollo stuffed it in the back of his pocket of his trousers, and Oscar didn't notice a thing. But then Karlson on the roof cautiously reached in through the gap in the curtains with one chubby hand and took the wallet out of Spike's back pocket, and Spike didn't notice a thing. Then Karlson reached in with one chubby hand and took the watch out of Rollo's back pocket, and Rollo didn't notice a thing. A short while later, after Oscar and Rollo and Spike had had some more to eat and drink, Spike put his hand in his back pocket and discovered the wallet was missing. Then he glowered at Rollo and said, "Listen here, Rollo, come out to the hall. There's something I need to talk to you about." Just then, Rollo felt in his back pocket and noticed the watch was missing, and he glowered at Spike and said, "That suits me fine because there's something I need to talk to you about too." So Rollo and Spike went out in the hall, and poor Oscar was left sitting on his own. He soon got bored and went out to the hall to see what was keeping Rollo and Spike. Then Karlson clambered quickly over the window ledge and put Oscar's wallet in the soup tureen. But Rollo and Spike and Oscar had finished up the soup so it didn't get wet, and Karlson fixed Oscar's watch to the lamp above the table, where it dangled down and was the first thing Oscar and Rollo and Spike saw when they came back in. But they didn't see Karlson because he had crept underneath the table, which went right down to the floor. And by then Smidge was also sitting under the table because he wanted to be wherever Karlson was, even if it was risky. "Look, that's my watch hanging there," said Oscar. "How in the world did it get there?" And he unhooked the watch and put it in his waistcoat pocket. "And there's my wallet," he said, staring down into the soup tureen. "How very odd." Rollo and Spike looked admiringly at Oscar, and Spike said, "Seems like you country folk aren't as slow as they say." Then Rollo and Spike and Oscar sat back down at the table. "Oscar, my friend, have some more to eat and drink," said Spike. And Oscar and Rollo and Spike ate and drank and slapped each other on the back. And a short while later, Spike's hand reached under the tablecloth and laid Oscar's wallet carefully on the floor. He thought it would be safer there than in his trouser pocket, but it wasn't, because Karlson grabbed up the wallet straight away and passed it to Rollo, and Rollo took up the wallet and said, "Spike, I've done you an injustice. You're an honest man." A short while later, Rollo's hand reached under the tablecloth and laid Oscar's watch carefully on the floor. Karlson picked up the watch and gently shook Spike's leg and passed Oscar's watch to him. And Spike said, "Nobody could have a better mate than you, Rollo." But a bit later, Oscar asked, "Where's my wallet and where's my watch?" And then the wallet and the watch were both popped under the tablecloth as quick as a flash, because Spike didn't dare keep the watch, and Rollo didn't dare keep the wallet, if Oscar was going to start making a fuss. And Oscar certainly did start making a fuss, quite a loud one, shouting that he wanted his watch and his wallet. But then Spike said, "How are we supposed to know where you've gone and left your old wallet?" And Rollo said, "We haven't seen your old watch. Keep a better eye on your things." But then Karlson picked up first the wallet and then the watch and passed them up to Oscar, who put them both away and said, "Thank you, Spike, and thank you, Rollo. But that's quite enough joking for now." Then Karlson kicked Spike's shin as hard as he could, and Spike roared, "I'll get you for that, Rollo." Then Karlson kicked Rollo's shin as hard as he could, and Rollo roared, "What's up with you, Spike? Why are you kicking me?" And Rollo and Spike leapt up and hurled themselves at each other, knocking all the plates off the table and smashing them. Oscar was so scared that he crept out with his wallet and watch and never came back. Smidge was scared too, but he couldn't leave, so he had to sit quiet and still under the tablecloth. Spike was stronger than Rollo, and he chased Rollo out into the hall and stayed to beat him up a bit more. Then Karlson and Smidge crawled out from under the tablecloth and saw all the smashed plates on the floor, and Karlson said, "Why should the soup tureen be left in one piece when all the plates are broken? It'll be so lonely, poor soup tureen." So he hurled the tureen into the floor, with a crash. And then he and Smidge raced to the window and climbed out as fast as they could. Smidge heard Spike and Rollo come back into the room, and Spike said, "Why on earth did you give him back his watch and wallet, fish face?" "Are you off your head?" said Rollo. "You were the one who did it." That made Karlson laugh until his belly wobbled, and then he said, "That's enough jiggery-pokery for me today." Smidge felt he had enough jiggery-pokery too. It was getting quite dark, and Smidge and Karlson took each other by the hand and walked back over the roofs to Karlson's house, which was on top of Smidge's house. As they got back, they heard a fire engine coming along the street with its siren wailing. "There must be a fire somewhere," said Smidge. "The firemen are coming." "What if it's in this building?" said Karlson hopefully. "They only need to say the word and I can help them, because I'm the world's best fire putter-outer." They could see the fire engine had stopped in the street below, and a crowd of people had gathered around it, but they couldn't see a fire anywhere. On the other hand, they did suddenly see a ladder come shooting up towards the roof, one of those turntable ladders the firemen use. That made Smidge start to think, what if they're coming for me, he said. He had suddenly remembered the note he had left in his room, and it was getting quite late. "Bless me, why ever would they do that?" said Karlson. Nobody could mind you being up on the roof for a little while. Oh, my mom would, said Smidge. She's got so many nerves that they all fray in all directions. He felt sorry for his mother when he thought about it and longed to see her. We could have a bit of jiggery-poke with the fire brigade, of course, suggested Karlson. But Smidge didn't want to jiggery-poke anymore. He stood quietly waiting for the firefighter who was climbing up the ladder. Oh, well, said Karlson. Perhaps it's time for me to pop indoors to bed. I know we've been taking it easy and not jiggery-poking too much, but I did have a fever of at least 30 or 40 degrees this morning. We must bear that in mind. And he scampered off over the roof. Hasten Hobson, Smidge, he shouted. Hasten Hobson, Karlson, said Smidge, but all the while he was watching the firefighter get closer. Hey, Smidge, called Karlson, just before he vanished behind the chimney. Don't tell the fire brigade I'm here, because I'm the world's best fire-putter-outer, and they'd only be asking for me every time there was a fire. The firefighter was almost at roof level. Stay where you are, he shouted to Smidge. Don't move and I'll be there to get you. It was kind of him, Smidge thought, but rather unnecessary. Smidge had been walking around on the roof all afternoon, so he could easily manage a few steps more. Was it my mum who sent you? He asked, when he was on his way down the turntable ladder in his firefighter's arms. Yes, who else? Said the firefighter. But hang on a minute. Didn't I see 2 little boys up on the roof? Smidge remembered what Karlson had told him, and answered earnestly, No, the only boy was me. Mom certainly did have enough nerves to fray in all directions. She and Dad and Seb and Sally and lots of other people were down in the street to receive Smidge, and Mom threw herself at him and hugged him, laughing and crying at the same time. And Dad carried him right up to the flat, cuddling him tightly all the way. And Seb said, You really know how to scare the daylights out of people, little brother. And Sally was crying too, and she said, You mustn't do that ever again, promise? And then Smidge was in bed a little while later. They all gathered around him as if it was his birthday. But Dad said very seriously, Didn't you realize we'd be worried? Didn't you realize Mom would cry and be upset? Squidge squirmed as he lay there. Not as upset as that, he mumbled. Mom hugged him very hard and said, What if you had fallen? What if we would lose you? Would you all have been sad? Asked Smidge hopefully. Yes, of course, said Mom. We wouldn't want to lose you at any price. Surely you know that. Not even for 100,000 million kronor? Asked Smidge. No, not even for 100,000 million coins. Am I worth that much? Asked Smidge in amazement. Oh, yes, said Mom, and hugged him again. Smidge started thinking. 100,000 million coins. What a terrible lot of money. Could it really be possible he was worth that much? When you could get a really nice puppy for 200 coins. You know what, Dad, said Smidge, when he had finished thinking. If I'm worth 100,000 million coins, could I please have 200 of those in cash so I can buy a little dog? The end. What happens next time, you will find out on Friday at 4. So I'll see you guys again on Friday, and have a wonderful day.